The Wall Street Journal reports that Donald Trump's administration could impose 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada as soon as Saturday. Over the weekend, Donald Trump proved that he meant what he said when he said what he meant. The Colombian president turned back military planes that were returning migrants. Trump said he'd impose 25% tariffs on Colombian imports. Colombia backed down. Trump then posted an AI-generated picture of himself as a 1920s gangster with the acronym FAFO in the background. That stands for F around, find out, in case you haven't already gone down that rabbit hole like us. How worried is Mexico now, and can the government do anything to avert tariffs? Well, Katarina Schultz is a freelance reporter in Mexico and joins me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So what economic impact could the 25% tariff have?
Well, that tariff of that type of magnitude would heavily impact both Mexico and the United States. In Mexico, the United States is their number one trading partner in three main industries. So agriculture, electronics, and majorly in the automotive industry. So this would impact significant jobs for Mexican people who work in these sort of trade dependent, export dependent regions. And it would also drive up costs of these products in the United States, especially considering Mexico provides a lot of these products and produces most of these products in terms of agriculture and car parts for the US. So this type of tariff would, of course, impact the quality of life for Mexicans and also costs for consumers in the United States. It would also likely deter foreign investment in Mexico, as there would be this sort of heightened perception of instability in terms of trade with Mexico and the United States.
And what issues are on the table for Trump? Is there anything I think I want to know if Mexico could actually do in the next few days to avert the threat of tariffs?
Totally. I mean, this tariff threat really is a way for Donald Trump to tell the Mexican federal government, the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, you need to get a hold of the border of migration and the flow of illegal products like fentanyl, which is a number one concern for Donald Trump, that's going into the crossing the American-Mexican border. And so, in a way, this tariff is telling Claudia Sheinbaum, hey, we are trying to secure the border, but we need you to do this. In a way, Donald Trump and the American government doesn't want to be responsible for securing that American border and really tackling the criminal networks that are pushing across drugs and migrants. So if the Mexican government really does step up patrols along the border and also try to tackle those criminal networks. I mean, it's a reason why Donald Trump designated the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. It's just another sort of way to strong arm the Mexican president. Perhaps, he will really lay off with those tariff threats, but it's hard to say.
And what in concrete terms does that actually look like in the next few days? You've only got until Saturday. What actually is there that the government can do in specific terms to make sure that those don't ever come into force? Because it sounds like there's clearly things they could do in the longer term, and they can prove to Trump that they will take these things seriously. But there's only a matter of days, really, before something as serious as this happens. And I'm just wondering if Trump has very specific asks for what he wants to happen before that point.
I think if Mexican authorities deploy troops along the border and perhaps really show, okay, we're here, we're not messing around, we're going to see if we can sort of stop the flow of migrants and drugs into the United States, that could be a sort of short-term action that would show President Donald Trump that the Mexican government is sort of on it and they're trying to work towards securing the border. The Mexican government did, in fact, just launch an app called the Consul app that is meant for people who are being deported from the United States back into Mexico. And I think sort of actions like that, in a way, show Donald Trump, okay, the Mexican government is taking responsibility. They're aware that he's very serious about border issues and migration. And I think that if the Mexican government really pushes forward and says, okay, we've secured A, B, and C tunnel that we've been aware of as having been a sort of flow of migrants and drugs by criminal networks. It's something that they're using to cross into whether it's Texas or New Mexico. That could be something that happens in the next couple of days, an increased presence of the National Guard, the Mexican National Guard along the border. I think in a way that would sort of relax Trump's concerns. But whether or not the Mexican government is willing to do this is very unclear.
With us now is Michael Reid, journalist and author of The Forgotten Continent, A History of the New Latin America. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Is this an unexpected concession from Colombia that they are now going to take people and they are now going to help?
No, I think, Gustavo Petro, the president, is well known for his emotional improvisation and his outbursts. And I think that's what happened yesterday. He got into a tweeting war with President Trump. And I think calmer voices in Colombia persuaded him to stand down, because the cost of tariffs and visa restrictions for Colombia would have been considerable. Now, clearly, in the longer term, this kind of bullying approach to international relations will make a lot of countries, I think, consider alternatives to the United States. You
mean considering alternatives in trade, so they are not so reliant, so they can maybe stand up in a stronger way than the president of Colombia managed to.
Exactly, I think so, because this kind of threat can be brutally effective in the short term, but obviously it does raise questions for those who are on the wrong end of it.
The kind of deportations that Donald Trump is both talking about and making happen, how significant a change is that from what the Biden administration would have done?
I think it's the rhetoric is obviously much more aggressive. There have been a lot of flights just in the first few days, a lot of deportation flights. But ever since Obama, really, actually, deportations have been pretty regular occurrences. And these flights from the US occur every week in a number of Latin American countries. So I think it's the scale rather than the principle that may change.
And do you think, will there be political consequences for President Petro in terms of that he's both had this fight and lost it?
I think it's hard to tell, immediately. I mean, on the one hand, it confirms what many of his critics say, that, he isn't a calm head in these situations. On the other hand, I think that Trump will stir up a nationalist reaction across Latin America, particularly if his threats about retaking the Panama Canal, whatever that might mean, were to be turned into action on the one hand, and if he starts actually imposing tariffs rather than merely threatening it.
I mean, across Latin America generally, are people sort of expecting what follows from Donald Trump with a great deal of trepidation? Because presumably economies across Latin America are quite heavily dependent on the United States.
Well, it depends where you are. I mean, for Mexico, it's an existential threat. I mean, 80% of Mexico's exports go to the United States. The two countries are deeply integrated economically. And for President Sheinbaum in Mexico, preserving that trade link is absolutely crucial. So, she is making concessions on other things, which is sensible given her circumstances. The further south you go, for Colombia, the US is still its largest single trade partner, but it takes only around 27, 28% of Colombian exports. When you go to South America, it's China. That's the biggest trade partner. And that tendency may well increase under Trump.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, that would be an interesting consequence. Michael Reid, he is a journalist and an author specialising in Latin America. Good to speak to you just then.